For 600 years, the Voynich Manuscript has stumped scholars, cryptographers, physicists, computer scientists.
It is a 600-year-old book of looping, unknown script, wrapped around plants that grow nowhere on Earth, and to this day, nobody alive can read one word of it. Even a team of codebreakers who cracked Japan's purple cipher, one of the toughest codes ever broken, took a run at it. And they failed. That is the Voynich Manuscript. So when researchers announced that artificial intelligence had finally read its opening line, the world paid attention, because after 6 centuries of silence, a machine had supposedly pulled a real sentence straight out of the most mysterious book on Earth. It did shock scientists, but not the way the headline suggests. It shocked them because it fell apart. Only the latest time someone claimed to have cracked the Voynich and was quietly proven wrong. If you enjoy mysteries the smartest people alive still cannot solve, take a second to subscribe. The AI claim. The story that put the Voynich Manuscript back in the headlines started in January of 2018, inside a computing lab at the University of Alberta. A language expert named Greg Kondrak and his graduate student Bradley Hauer decided to try something no one had really pushed hard before, letting a computer take a run at the book instead of a human codebreaker. And rather than try to translate the strange script word by word, the way everyone before them had, they went after a smaller, smarter question first. Before you can read a text, you have to know what language it is written in. So that is where they started. Their approach was clever, and it rested on a simple idea that every language leaves behind a statistical fingerprint in how often its letters and combinations appear. To teach their program to recognize those fingerprints, they use the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a short document that has been translated into hundreds of languages and fed the system versions of it in around 380 of them. Once the program had learned what each language looked like by the numbers, they turned it loose on the Voynich script to see which one it matched. Going in, they suspected the answer would be Arabic, but the program disagreed, and what came back instead was Hebrew, the ancient language of the Jewish people, still written and spoken today. From there, they pushed the idea one step further. They guessed that the Voynich words were not written straight, but scrambled. Each one turned into an anagram, a word whose letters have been shuffled into a different order, except here the letters were also sorted alphabetically, and the vowels dropped entirely. When they ran the manuscript's opening line back through that unscrambling process, and then through Google Translate, they got an actual sentence, the first readable words anyone claimed to have pulled from the book in a century. It read roughly, "She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house, and me, and people." It was a strange line to open a book with, but it was readable, and that was enough to set the world alight. Kondrak, the computer scientist behind it, told reporters the sentence was grammatical and could be interpreted, and the press ran with it hard, with news outlets across the world announcing that a machine had finally cracked the most mysterious book on Earth. But the excitement did not survive contact with the experts. Almost as fast as it rose, it came apart. The trouble was not the part where they identified the language, which used solid, respected methods, but the last step, where they leaned on Google Translate, a tool built for modern Hebrew, to make sense of words that were supposedly 600 years old and scrambled on top of that. A native Hebrew speaker who looked at the sentence said it was not actually coherent. And the objections did not stop there. Medievalists pointed out that no historian of ancient Hebrew had ever been brought in to check the meaning, something Kondrak himself admitted the work would need. Critics noted the deeper hole underneath it all, that the program could suggest Hebrew as a match, but could not actually prove it was right. And the most damning point of all came from the researchers themselves. In their own paper, to their credit, they had already admitted the catch. Their results, they wrote, could be genuine clues pointing to Hebrew, or they could simply be a trick of the method. Because when you are allowed to rearrange the letters of every single word however you like, you can, eventually, squeeze some meaning out of almost anything. Within days, the great AI breakthrough had quietly become one more failed attempt on a very long list, which raises the question that the rest of this story keeps circling back to. Why is this one book so impossible to read? The book no one can read. Start with the book itself, because the Voynich is not just hard to read, it is hard in a way almost nothing else in history is. The manuscript sits today in Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, where it is catalogued under the plain name MS 408. It runs to around 240 surviving pages, all of them made not from paper, but from vellum, a writing surface prepared from treated animal skin, which is part of how we know roughly when it was made. Across those pages runs an elegant looping script of somewhere between 25 and 30 different characters, flowing left to right in neat lines, and handwriting analysis suggests it was written by more than one person. And this is where the real pull of the book begins, because it does not look like a puzzle or a trick. It looks, at a glance, like an ordinary book written in an ordinary language. The lines are clean, the hand is steady, and there is none of the aimless scribbling you would expect from someone faking it. It has the confident rhythm of writing that means something. The problem is that no one on earth can say what. And then there are the pictures, which only deepen the mystery instead of solving it. The pages are crowded with illustrations, and scholars have used those images to divide the book into 6 rough sections, since the words themselves give no help. One section is full of plants, another is packed with star charts and zodiac symbols, and others show women bathing in pools linked by strange tubes, circular diagrams some call rosettes, jars that look like pharmacy equipment, and dense blocks of text that may be recipes. But every one of those labels is only a guess, drawn entirely from what the pictures seem to show. The catch is that the plants match no known species on Earth, the star charts point to nothing anyone can identify, and the bathing figures carry no clear meaning, so the drawings tease its sense without ever quite delivering it. That is really the heart of the difficulty. Most great decoding problems give you a way in. When codebreakers sit down with a coded message, they can usually count on one crucial advantage: knowing what language is buried underneath the code. And that single piece of knowledge is the crack they pry the whole thing open with. The Voynich offers no such foothold. As the researchers themselves put it, it is an unknown script encoding an unknown language, which is the hardest possible version of the problem. You do not know the code, you do not know the language hiding under it, and you cannot even be sure there is a real language there at all, which leaves the field wide open, and that is exactly why it stays so contested. After a century of study, the book could still be a lost language, a coded version of a known one, a real medical text, or an elaborate hoax, and nobody has ruled any of them out. That open space, where every explanation is still on the table and none can be proven, is precisely the ground where bold claims of victory keep taking root. Kondrak and Hauer were not the first to plant a flag in it, and to see how deep the pattern runs, you have to go back to the people who tried long before any computer was pointed at the book. The codebreakers who failed. The truth is that people were failing to read this book, and the names on that list are not hobbyists. Some of the most gifted codebreakers of the 20th century, the people whose work cracking enemy ciphers helped decide the outcome of wars, sat down with the Voynich, gave it everything they had, and walked away with nothing. The clearest example is William Friedman. He is one of the towering figures in the history of code breaking, the man who led the American effort to crack Japan's purple cipher during the Second World War, and whose methods effectively trained generations of analysts at the National Security Agency. Reading coded messages that were designed to be unreadable was, quite literally, his life's work, and there was very little he could not get into. Then he found the Voynich. Friedman did not glance at the manuscript and move on. He worked at it, on and off, for more than 3 decades, even pulling together teams of fellow codebreakers in their spare hours to attack the problem alongside him. And after all of that, he surrendered, but not in the way you might expect. His final conclusion, which he hid inside a coded anagram and left to be unscrambled only after his death, was not a translation at all. It was a theory that the Voynich was probably not a secret code hiding a real message, but an early attempt to build an artificial language from scratch, an invented tongue that would not become fashionable until well after the book was made. His wife Elizabeth, herself a brilliant codebreaker, agreed with him, and he was not alone. Across the decades, one skilled cryptographer after another has taken the Voynich apart and been defeated by it, to the point that the honest summary of the whole field is simple. No one has ever produced a solution that other experts could confirm. So by the time modern researchers started feeding the book into computers, the pattern was already a century deep. The greatest human minds in the business had failed, publicly and repeatedly, and the book had not given up a single word. That did nothing to slow the announcements, and the modern wave of claims, the ones that would race around the internet and collapse within days, was about to begin. The man who said it was Latin. The first of the modern claims to really catch fire arrived in September of 2017, and it came from a man named Nicholas Gibbs, a history researcher and television writer. Gibbs published his findings in the Times Literary Supplement, a serious and respected outlet, which helped the story travel fast. His claim was that everyone had been overcomplicating the manuscript for a century. It was not, he argued, written in some lost language or wrapped in an unbreakable code at all. It was Latin, just heavily abbreviated, a medieval shorthand, a system from the Middle Ages where a single mark stood in for a longer, common word or phrase to save time and space. From there, Gibbs built a tidy picture of what the book actually was. He said it was a guide to women's health, a medical text partly copied from other similar works of the time, rather than written from scratch. It was a simple, human-sized answer to a mystery that had beaten everyone else, and for a short while it looked like it might be right. Headlines announced that the Voynich had finally been read. Then the scholars actually checked it, and it fell apart quickly. Medievalists, the historians who specialize in the Middle Ages and read manuscripts like this for a living, went through Gibbs's abbreviations and found that when you expanded them the way he claimed, they did not add up to grammatical Latin. The sentences simply did not work. And then came the detail that sank whatever was left. Reporting on the story noted that Gibbs appeared to have come up with his theory in the first place as part of a pitch to sell a television program about the manuscript. That was reason enough for the scholarly world to set the claim aside, and within days it was gone. Another confident solution that had not survived contact with the experts. Gibbs was the clearest modern example yet, but he was about to be outdone because the next claim would not come from a lone researcher. Before we get to the next one, and it is the biggest of them all, the one an entire university put its name behind. Take a second to subscribe if you're enjoying this. Cracked in 2 weeks, then retracted in May, the University of Bristol put out a press release announcing that one of its own academics, a research associate named Gerard Cheshire, had done what centuries of cryptographers and computers could not. He had cracked the Voynich, and according to Bristol, it had taken him just 2 weeks. Cheshire's claim ran in a completely different direction from Gibbs. The text was not a code, and not Latin, he said, but a language he called Proto-Romance, a supposedly lost ancestor of Italian, French, and Spanish that had left no other written trace anywhere on Earth except this one book. And he had a full story to go with it. The manuscript, he said, was a therapeutic reference book, a guide to herbal remedies and healing baths put together by nuns for Maria of Castile, the Queen of Aragon. It was the claim built to spread because it had everything a story needs to travel. A respected university stood behind it. The paper had passed peer review. The solution was dramatic, and there was even a queen attached to it. For a moment, it looked like the 600-year silence had finally broken. Then the linguists arrived, the experts who study how languages are built and how they work. And this is where the title's word, shocked, gets its real meaning. Scientists were shocked, just not the way the headlines suggested. They were not stunned that the code had fallen. They were stunned by how little was holding the claim up. Experts in Romance languages pointed out that Cheshire's Proto-Romance was not a documented language at all, but a moving target, with words pulled from different languages and different centuries to fit whatever he wanted a given passage to say. The sharpest response came from Lisa Fagan Davis, executive director of the Medieval Academy of America. Proto-Romance, she said flatly, is not a thing. And she called the whole idea aspirational, self-fulfilling nonsense. Then came the part that set this claim apart. Within a day or two of its own announcement, under heavy criticism from language and history scholars, the University of Bristol pulled the press release and distanced itself from the work, stating it was the author's own and not affiliated with the university. Think about how unusual that is. A university told the world it had solved a 600-year-old mystery, and then, barely 2 days later, took the announcement back. The most high-profile Voynich solution in years was retracted by the very people who had promoted it. Which leaves a strange question hanging over all of it. If the book keeps defeating everyone, from the wartime codebreakers to an AI team to an entire university, then why do serious people keep coming back to it, convinced there is something real to find? Why they keep trying? And the answer is what makes this book so much stranger than an ordinary mystery. When you actually study the Voynich text, it does not look like random gibberish. It looks like a real language, one written down by someone who knew what they were doing, which is exactly why it refuses to let people go. The clearest evidence came in 2013 from a physicist named Marcello Montemurro at the University of Manchester. Instead of trying to translate the text, he analyzed its structure statistically, the way you might study the shape of a language without knowing a single word of it. And he found real patterns. Content-bearing words, the ones that carry meaning, clustered together the way they do in genuine writing. Even more striking, certain words showed up only in certain illustrated sections, so the vocabulary in the plant pages differed from the vocabulary in the astronomical pages, exactly the way a real book about different subjects uses different words. Montemurro argued that faking this in the 15th century would have been extraordinarily hard, because the mathematical understanding of how language behaves statistically did not even exist yet. And that is the pull that keeps drawing people back, because the book carries the signature of something written to mean something. But structure alone does not prove meaning. The leading voice on the other side is a researcher named Gordon Rugg, who in a 2004 paper argued that all of that structure could be manufactured without any language behind it. His method used a device called a cardan grill, a piece of card with holes cut in it, laid over a big table of meaningless syllable fragments. You place the card over the table, and only a few syllables show through the holes. You write those down as a word, slide the card to a new spot, and do it again. Repeat that thousands of times, and you fill page after page with invented words that all follow the same neat, rule-following structure Montemurro pointed to, without a single one of them meaning anything. So the tool at the heart of the leading hoax theory did not exist until roughly 112 years after the book was already made. Rugg has tried to reason around that gap, suggesting either that some earlier version of the grill existed and was lost, or that the manuscript was forged later on old leftover vellum, but neither has ever been proven. And that is the whole trap in one picture. The Voynich is structured enough to convince serious people there must be a message inside, and slippery enough that no one can ever pin it down, while the leading argument that it means nothing has a century-sized hole in its own timeline. So it should be no surprise that the pattern has followed us straight into the present, where the most powerful tool anyone has ever pointed at the book is making the boldest claims yet. The current AI wave. Which brings us back to where we started. Right now, the internet is once again full of the news that the Voynich has finally been cracked. Only this time, the codebreaker is not a wartime cryptographer or a lone academic. It is modern artificial intelligence, and the claim is that a machine has at last read the book that beat everyone else. By now, you should be able to feel exactly what is wrong with that, because it fits the mold perfectly. There is an announcement, there is a first message, and there is no confirmation from the people who study this manuscript for a living. Cryptologists and medieval historians say what they have said every other time. There is no accepted translation, and the book remains unread. And there is a specific reason AI keeps failing here, the same trap that caught Kondrak and Hauer in 2018. A language model is a very powerful pattern matcher. Feed it text, and it will hunt for patterns, and hand you back something that reads smoothly and sounds sure of itself. But sounding sure is not the same as being right. With the Voynich, the machine is guessing in the dark, because it does not know the script, it cannot name the language, and no one has ever confirmed there is a real message hiding in there at all. When that is the situation, a confident answer is not proof that the book has been read. It is just pattern matching dressed up to look like a translation, which is exactly the story of every claim before it. For 600 years, the Voynich has beaten everyone who claimed to read it. And when AI announced it had finally cracked the first line, scientists were shocked, not because the code had fallen, but because the claim collapsed like everyone before it. It stays unread today, a book orderly enough to convince the brightest minds there is a message inside, and slippery enough to defeat every last one of them. If you want more mysteries like this, subscribe.